Good morning. Panic breaks out in a Las Vegas hotel over the weekend, with people scrambling to quickly get out.
The Good Samaritan in the Indiana shooting identified, and more details revealed about the gunman's actions.
Rising crime rates in Baltimore are a top issue in Maryland's governor race. Voters are headed to the polls today for the state's primary.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen with some strong words for countries that threaten the international economic order. Find out what Yellen has to say about China. Good morning. Welcome to NTD. I'm Kevin Hogan.
Good morning. I'm Evelyn Lee. Today's Tuesday, July 19th. And we begin our day with a video that shows people panicking over the weekend at a hotel in Las Vegas. Police responded to calls of possible gunfire Saturday night, but there was no shooter. People apparently mistook shattered glass in the valet area for gunfire. We see panic of a possible shooter spreading throughout the crowd. Many fleeing, others hid behind tables, trying to judge first if it's safe to leave. It really is sad to see how traumatized America is because of everything that happened.
Several gamblers sustained minor injuries, with some being pushed up against a wall or being thrown to the ground. Now we head to Indiana, where one man prevented many deaths during a shooting. An armed citizen stopped an active shooter who killed 3 and injured 2 in an Indiana mall on Sunday. Local police identified him as 22-year-old Elijah Dickin. Dickin is being called a Good Samaritan for neutralizing the gunman in Sunday's shooting. He had no police or military training. Police say his actions were tactically sound as he engaged the suspect from a distance and appeared to be very proficient. He is being praised as a hero for saving many lives.
The Good Samaritan was armed with a pistol and engaged the shooter as he stood outside the restroom area firing into the food court. The shooter fired several rounds, striking the suspect. The suspect attempted to retreat back into the restroom and fell to the ground after being shot.
And also, we're very thankful for a young 22-year-old man who stopped this violent act. This young man, Greenwood's Good Samaritan, acted within seconds, stopping the shooter and saving countless lives.
The suspected shooter, 20-year-old Jonathan Spearman, carried 3 legally bought weapons and 100 rounds of ammunition to the mall. Within 2 minutes after he opened fire, he was shot and killed by Dickin. He fired 24 bullets, killing 3 and injuring 2 before being stopped. Spearman had no adult criminal history but had minor offenses as a juvenile. These include a fight at school and running away from home. He quit his warehouse job in May. His family says they are surprised and there were no indicators that he was violent or unstable. Spearman spent an hour in the bathroom preparing his weapon before the shooting began.
He had multiple magazines and over 100 rounds of ammunition on his person and in his possession. We know that from family members that he has been practicing shooting at Range USA. The ATF has made contact with Range USA and received records from them that show that he was frequently using their range and purchasing ammunition at that location for the past 2 years.
Dickens was seen signaling to others to escape from the exit behind him as he was engaging the shooter. After the suspect was down, Dickens turned himself and his weapon into police. He was released, though, after police reviewed the security footage.
The U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen fired off some harsh words for China on Tuesday. She says nations remain vulnerable to countries using their market positions to exercise political leverage. Yellen says China has benefited enormously from the current system and that the U.S. will demand strong adherence to norms and values that support the international economic order.
We will impose harsh consequences on those countries that abuse or break that order. One such example is China, which has directed significant resources to seek a dominant position in the manufacturing of certain advanced technologies, including semiconductors, while employing a range of unfair trade practices to achieve this position.
Yellen is calling for a modernization of world trading practices and less dependency on China for products. She is in South Korea today to tour the LG Chem battery facilities in Seoul. The CEO of LG Chem says they are considering building a manufacturing plant in the U.S. to strengthen the battery supply chain.
Maryland is holding its primary for governor today. Crime is becoming the top issue for voters in the state, with crime rates in Baltimore rising over the last year. We take a look at the top candidates from both sides. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has more.
Democrats in Maryland are hoping to flip the governor's seat this year. Due to term limits, Republican Governor Larry Hogan is unable to run for re-election. Top Democratic candidates include former U.S. Labor Secretary Tom Perez and best-selling author Wes Moore. State Comptroller Peter Franchot and John King, a former U.S. Education Secretary during the Obama administration, are also frontrunners on the Democratic side. Gun-related crimes rose 10% in Baltimore over the last year, and overall violent crimes are up 6%. Democratic candidates say they support police reform, but that it doesn't mean they are soft on crime. For Republicans, candidates include Trump-endorsed state legislator Dan Cox, former state lawmaker Robin Ficker, attorney Joe Werner, and former state legislator Kelly Schulz. Schulz is running as Hogan's hand-picked successor to carry on his legacy. She served as a labor secretary in Hogan's administration and then as head of the state's Commerce Department. She would be Maryland's first female governor if she wins in November. Trump-backed Dan Cox sued Hogan over his stay-at-home orders and regulations during the pandemic, saying the orders were unconstitutional. He also filed a resolution of impeachment against Hogan for his actions during the pandemic. Trump's endorsement touts Cox's support for the military, the Second Amendment, and election integrity. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Democrats outnumber Republicans by 2-1 in Maryland, but the GOP has won 3 of the past 5 elections for governor.
On Monday, a group of Democrats rallied to expand the number of justices on the Supreme Court. This is to force the nation's highest court to reverse course after a string of conservative rulings. But the White House has so far reversed its support for the expansion. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the details.
From abortion access to gun rights, the government's regulatory authority, and more, the Supreme Court has issued a string of rulings that have blunted Democrats' decades-long legislative victories.
We can't assume for a second that the court is done, as my colleagues have mentioned.
Now, more than 60 House Democrats and a handful of senators are pushing a bill to add 4 justices to the nation's highest court, to force a change in direction for interpreting the laws of the land.
Expanding the court will protect us from future bad decisions.
A move that President Biden has repeatedly said he does not support. Despite the lack of support from the White House, Democrats on Capitol Hill have called to expand the court for the past year, while Republicans have painted it as a radical effort to exert control. Democrats push back that the idea is radical, citing the fact that the number of sitting justices have been changed 7 times.
We can do it an 8th time, absolutely.
However, the current 9-justice makeup has not changed since 1869. And a repeated message we heard from many of these members is that they want to hold justices accountable if they rule differently than they said they would as they were going through their Senate confirmation hearings. We asked them if this means they would be open to giving Congress or the White House the ability to unseat justices if they did rule differently than they originally said they would. Here's their response.
All ideas are on the table. Our form of government is in need of remodeling, rehab.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
And over New York, 2 residents were arrested on federal charges of money laundering and fraud. The Chinese naturalized U.S. citizens tricked foreign donors into investing millions of dollars in a fake project by falsely claiming their connections with U.S. politicians.
According to a Justice Department complaint, more than 150 investors lost millions of dollars on an investment scheme that promised to construct an educational institution in rural New York. Allegedly, many of the investors were foreign nationals living outside of the United States who were promised green cards and access to prominent U.S. politicians in exchange for their investments. Sherry Shui Li and Lian Bo Wang are accused of cooking up a multi-layered scheme which defrauded investors out of more than $27 million. The pair allegedly convinced investors by saying they had the support of prominent politicians. For example, the Patch reported that federal prosecutors said Li took a photo in June 2017 with then-President Trump at a fundraiser, then used it to solicit investments for the fake project. They also allegedly charged 12 foreign nationals $93,000 each to attend the fundraiser. A special agent said in a statement that the pair used the illegal money to live a luxurious life and make friends with prominent politicians. In December 2013, the New York Post reported that Li approached officials in a small upstate New York community about building a Disney-like China City of America, complete with an amusement park, huge mansions, and a famous Chinese city. Arlene Richards, NTD News, New York.
After reaching an all-time high of $5 a gallon, we could begin to see gas prices dropping.
We think it's reasonable to expect more gas stations to lower their prices in response to lower input costs, and thus, barring unforeseen market disruptions, to see average prices fall below $4 per gallon in more places in coming weeks.
Oil prices have dropped $20 since June, and wholesale gas prices have also dropped in price. Gas prices are expected to drop below $4 a gallon, with prices already beginning to drop. 46 states and the District of Columbia are seeing gas prices decline. The standouts are in Indiana with 52-cent declines and Ohio having 51-cent declines. Internationally, fuel demand has been declining because of high costs and the strength of the U.S. dollar making fuel more expensive. Truck drivers in Oakland, California choked off traffic at the seaport on Monday. They were protesting against a state law that toughens standards on classifying workers as independent contractors.
The law, known as AB 5 or the gig worker law, would make it harder for independent contractors to transport goods. It could potentially limit labor at the state's already clogged seaports, threatening to worsen the nation's pandemic-fueled supply chain issues. Independent truckers who now operate under the authority and insurance of companies that hire them for jobs would be shouldered with the hefty costs and red tape of taking that on when the law is enacted.
That will increase our costs and, not just costs, and it takes a lot of hassle. We need to hire people to, help us do all the paperwork.
Now they want to make you responsible for everything, the equipment, and all the containers we pull out from the port.
California's ports handle about 40% of container goods that enter the United States. Trucking disruptions come at a time when unions and West Coast port employers are negotiating a high-stakes labor contract. Legal challenges kept the law from going into effect in 2020, but the U.S. Supreme Court last month denied a California Trucking Association petition claiming the law is blocked by federal regulations. Experts say an injunction putting the law on hold could soon be lifted. More than 100 drivers and small trucking company operators opposed to the law swarmed 2 terminal gates in the Port of Oakland, slowing truck entry to a trickle. The action came after port truckers in Los Angeles picketed gates and snarled roadways at the nation's busiest seaport complex last week.
The U.S. Treasury Department approved 9 state plans for small business capital funds on Monday. Altogether, those state plans will be worth $940 million. The federal stimulus package allocated $10 billion to the state's Small Business Credit Initiative. It aims to address a shortage of capital for new business startups and other small business development. The program expects it'll generate $10 of private investment for every $1 of taxpayer funding. The approvals intend to make capital more accessible to small firms and entrepreneurs. The funds are released in portions. That means each following payment will depend on whether businesses can meet performance targets from prior funds. A Treasury official says additional state plans are nearing approval. The Treasury hopes to finish reviewing all state applications by late summer.
And coming up, Sweden and Finland have voted to join NATO. The House voted in favor with a 96% majority. And the war in Ukraine has caused some countries to ban exports to Russia. The embargo has been devastating for Greek fur producers relying on Russian consumers. Stay tuned for more after the short break. The House voted on Monday to support Finland and Sweden's application to join NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Members voted 394 to 18 in support of the resolution, as well as calling on all members of NATO to ratify the protocols of accession swiftly. Finland and Sweden's upcoming NATO memberships mark a major shift in not only their individual security policies, but the overall defense architecture of Europe. Both countries adopted a neutral stance toward Russia for the most of their recent history, but the unprovoked invasion of Ukraine propelled them to take a new direction.
For decades, Antonis Dicio's fur garment business was bustling, filling orders for his wealthy Russian buyers. But in March, European Union sanctions against Russia shut the business overnight. Olivia Chan reports.
This is Antonis Dicio's closed fur showroom in northern Greece. For decades, it was bustling to fill orders for his wealthy Russian buyers. But in March, European Union sanctions over the Ukraine war shut the business overnight. Dicio's was banned from exporting to Russia and banned from selling to Russian tourists in his homeland, as fur is considered a luxury good. With no domestic market, he had to send his 23 workers home, and his stockrooms filled up with hundreds of unsold garments.
We have been in this profession for 40 years. We are hurting. They must help us.
Kastoria is the heartland of a centuries-old fur industry in Greece. It is Europe's last remaining fur manufacturing centre and one of the few EU countries still allowing fur farming, despite pressure from animal rights groups. So far, the country's roughly 2,000, mostly family-run businesses, employing about 4,000 people according to the Hellenic Fur Federation, have been supported by state aid, allowing them to avoid firings. Fur garments are among Greece's top 10 exports, but they have been declining over the years. A growing number of big fashion houses such as Gucci and Prada are committing to not using real fur in the future. And animal rights groups hope the cut-off from the Russian market could spell the end of the European fur market. But for 67-year-old seamstress Evangelia Eneniadou, who has been sewing garments since she was 15 years old, the livelihood of the city depend on the trade.
We all live from this. All the jobs are connected to the furs. If there is work in the fur industry, then the taxi driver has work, the hotel has work, the tavern has work. Everything depends on the furs. We all depend on it.
Flights were disrupted at London's Luton airport because of what was called a surface defect on the runway. Part of the tarmac actually melted in the high heat. The airport says engineers were called to the site to repair the damage. Britain's extreme heat warning is in effect for large parts of England as hot, dry weather scorching mainland Europe over the past week moves north. The high heat is affecting travel, healthcare, and schools. The village of Cavendish in eastern England hit 99.5 degrees on Monday. Even Air Force bases are not exempted. Here's what UK media reported Monday.
The RAF has halted flights in and out of RAF Brize Norton because the runway has melted in this extreme weather. Now, Brize Norton is in Oxfordshire. It's the largest RAF base in the country. And another source has been telling Sky News this afternoon that contingency plans have been implemented to ensure that there is no impact on any military operations today.
Britain's red heat alert will last through Tuesday when temperatures may reach 104 degrees. That would exceed the highest temperature ever recorded in Britain, which is just over 101 degrees.
A Cicada poem turns political. The author of a viral poem is in trouble after he allegedly alludes to Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping. NTD Sherwin Rong has a story.
Shanghai media group news agency editor Xuan Kejong posted a poem about cicada on his Weibo, the Chinese Twitter, last Friday, and he was quickly made to delete the poem after half an hour. The screenshot had already begun to circulate, and it draws the attention of the Chinese internet. The poem expresses his frustration with cicada's noise in Shanghai's sizzling summer heat. But his usage of terms like fathead, big ears, and think you are smart are being interpreted as allegedly referencing Xi Jinping, the CCP leader. In the censored environment of Chinese web, users will resort to indirect references to criticize the leadership, because direct criticism could bring trouble onto themselves. The news agency he works for allegedly scolded Xuan. According to an internal memo, Xuan acknowledged that he was unaware of the sensitivity and acted on emotions. Internet comments expressed their different reactions. One suggests they had not realized the poem was directed at Xi until it was deleted. Many netizens said such censorship has the opposite result. People was alerted and get to learn about the matter. Chinese internet is known to censor certain phrases deemed politically sensitive, especially towards the political leadership. In one instance, a popular app from China called Little Red Book deletes 564 terms associated with direct or indirect references to Xi Jinping, including terms like Winnie the Pooh, writing history.
And up next, watch massive waves sweep into Hawaii's South Shore. Wedding goers caught it on camera taking out tables and chairs. That's right when we come back. At Hawaii's South Shore, waves higher than 12 feet are rare. So wedding goers were caught by surprise when 20-foot waves came crashing in.
20-foot waves barreled into Hawaii's South Shores on Saturday evening. The giant waves crashed into a wedding held at Kailua Kona, sending tables and chairs flying. Wedding crashes of a different kind.
Some waves that were reaching 20 feet plus even. And so that's getting on the level of historic South swells where we don't see those every several decades or so.
Meteorologist Chris Brenchley says the tropical cyclone Darby, passing Hawaii, was not the culprit. He says the swell had come up from the South Pacific, where there is currently a particularly strong winter storm.
So you had swell, you had this high tide, and you had big waves that were crashing up over coastal areas and causing some damage and some flooding.
The waves swept through the wedding minutes before the ceremony was about to begin. But after the waves were ushered out of the venue, the mess was cleaned up and the newlyweds exchanged vows. This is Flinders Kingsley, NTD News.
And in Chile, dozens of dolphins were spotted making a splash on Monday. Needless to say, locals and passers-by were delighted. Video from local television showed a pod of dolphins happily swimming near Valparaiso Bay on Monday morning. Witnesses say there were between 50 and 100 dolphins. They quickly attracted the attention of locals and tourists at Valparaiso port. Turns out they were gray dolphins, also known as Risso's dolphin. That species is usually found in warm and temperate waters in the Indian, Pacific, and Atlantic Oceans.
A plummeting plane makes a soft nose-first landing on a city sidewalk, and the whole thing is caught on camera. Take a look at this.
It's not every day you see a plane make a parachute landing, but that's what happened in Bruges, Belgium, when a pilot was forced to deploy an emergency chute after his plane reportedly broke down mid-flight. The Telegraph reported the pilot told authorities he'd lost control of the craft after experiencing technical difficulties and began plummeting toward the ground. The two-seater plane crash-landed nose first on a sidewalk in the historic Belgian town, but the pilot walked away, and police say he was later treated for only minor injuries. Officials suggested the plane's emergency chute, called a ballistic recovery system, almost certainly saved the veteran pilot's life.
Wow, lucky he got out of that unscathed. By the way, did you know officials announced Olympic Games in LA? It's in 2028.
LA?
Are you gonna go?
You know, I've never been to LA, but it would actually be pretty cool to go for the Olympics. Have you ever been to the Olympics?
I have never been to the Olympics, and I have never been to LA. So 2028, our time.
Okay, interesting.
Right. Anyway, that's it for today's show. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. I'm Evelyn Lee.
And I'm Kevin Hogan.